You are watching Hurricane Ian make landfall on September 28th with a flight traffic relative to that. We were tracking, of course, all the flights in and out of Florida, and we saw a 71% increase in business aviation traffic on the West Coast airports of Florida in the 2 days prior to Hurricane Ian's landfall. So welcome to the FlightAware NBAA press conference. My name is Matt Davis. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer of FlightAware, and I'm joined by Tammy Bowe, who's our product manager, who has 25 years of aviation experience utilizing big data in order to solve complex aviation problems. Thank you for joining us this morning. So FlightAware started with the belief that data-driven insights can create better experiences for end users of the aviation ecosystem, including business aircraft operators, can help make aviation more sustainable, and can help reduce the cost of aviation. Here's a really practical example of one way that we do that. So imagine that you're on a commercial flight, the airline is calling for an on-time departure, and you walk to the gate about 15 minutes before the boarding time, and you notice that there's actually no aircraft at the gate. This is a confusing situation. How can you possibly have an on-time departure when there's no aircraft actually at the gate? So FlightAware created a feature called Where is My Aircraft? It allows the traveler to easily see the last known location of the aircraft that's been assigned to fly their flight. So again, this is a really simple example of how a data-driven insight can create a better experience for the end user, in this instance, the traveler. So how do we go about doing this on a day-to-day basis? Well, we're in the business of creating flight data objects. This has been our pursuit now for the last 17 years. So what's a flight data object? Well, it's very simple. It's just the story of a flight. You've experienced this in a commercial aviation context. You've experienced this in a business aviation context. So imagine that you're in the business aviation context. The passenger indicates that they want to depart at such and such time, going to some destination airport. So the aircraft operator files a flight plan. The passengers show up at the appointed time. Everybody boards the aircraft. They close the door, they start up the aircraft, they taxi out to the runway, make their way out to the departure runway, take off, maneuver, maybe enter a hold, descend and land, taxi into the FBO. So it's all of those components of that particular flight brought together in the right way that become the flight data object, or the story of a flight. There's 4 things that you have to do to be very, very good at telling the stories of flights, creating flight data objects. And FlightAware believes that we're the very best in the world at telling these stories. And again, this is something that we've been pursuing for over 17 years. So these are 4 fundamental steps that we'll walk you through very quickly. And it starts from the bottom and works its way up to the top. Step number 1, you have to be about the business of collecting data that goes into these stories of your flights. FlightAware is doing this on a global basis. We have 6 large families of data that are coming into the FlightAware ecosystem. I'm not going to go through all of these, but I would like to drill down into one, which is our terrestrial ADS-B receiver network. So as you know, aircraft are broadcasting their positions from their transponders. And these transponders are a 3-dimensional position, a latitude, a longitude, as well as the altitude of the aircraft. And FlightAware has established a network of over 35,000 listening radios. They're actually quite small, about the size of your iPhone, that are listening for these transponder signals that are being emitted from the aircraft. And we have these placed in over 200 different countries. So this gives us, if not the largest terrestrial ADS-B network in the world, very close, and it's very, very robust. All right, so we have all of these families of data coming into the FlightAware ecosystem on a global basis. Now, what's interesting about these data sources is that, they all have their own perspective about what's happening with a flight. And none of them really reconcile, none of them really agree, none of them have the full view of what's actually happening with a flight. And so that's the job of step number 2 of Hyperfeed, this intelligent data fusion process, where we're bringing all these unique data elements together in a way where we're taking out the most meaningful, most helpful information and putting it together in the very first iteration of the story of the flight, this flight data object. This is our largest ongoing engineering effort that we have at FlightAware. We're investing thousands of man hours on an ongoing basis at FlightAware every single year in this Hyperfeed effort. So the third step is the ability to enrich the stories of these flights. So Hyperfeed has generated the first iteration of these flight data objects, and we're able to actually enrich the story about what's going on with these flights. And we can do this in a way that's independent of these other data sources that we have coming in below. So there's two big examples of how we're able to do that. The very first one is we're able to actually independently detect the status of an aircraft. Aircraft status is on message, out message, in messages, things like that. And so FlightAware is actually not reliant upon an aircraft system to explicitly communicate to us those changes in status messages like the flight management system in an airplane often does. We can independently detect that. So we can observe when the aircraft has pulled into the FBO. We can observe when it's left the FBO. We can observe when it's taken off from the runway and landed on the runway, as well as lots of other novel indications of aircraft status. So that's one way that we're enriching the stories of these flights. The second way that we're enriching the stories of these flights is through our FlightAware Foresight program. FlightAware Foresight is an artificial intelligence and machine learning based approach where we're able to predict with a very high degree of accuracy, a degree of accuracy that's better than anything else that's available in the market today, about when an aircraft is going to be pulling into the gate or pulling into the FBO. These ETAs contain 30 to 50% less estimation error in them than even the ETAs that are generated out of the flight management systems themselves. So imagine that you're an operator of a constrained resource at an airport. You're trying to figure out when the best time is to send someone to the gate or deploy the fuel truck. A better ETA is going to help you more efficiently allocate those constrained resources. So we feed those enhancements back into Hyperfeed, bolt them onto these flight data objects. And what starts to emerge is this single source of truth. Because of these global data aggregation capabilities, which result in global flight storytelling capabilities, what is emerging is the ability to have a cohesive, unified view of everything that's going on in the world of aviation relating to flights. This is an unprecedented opportunity. This global observation capability has never existed before in the history of aviation, at least in a commercial standpoint. So this is more important than it's ever been. In this day and age that we live, where resources are more constrained, especially manpower, we have to be working collaboratively together across all the different stakeholders in order to extract the most efficiency and the highest level of utilization out of our constrained resources. So whether you're an air navigation service provider, an airport, or aircraft operators, you have to be working together. But the very first problem that you have to solve in this collaborative decision-making framework is you have to have a unified view and understanding of what it is that's actually happening right now, what could be happening in the future, and what has happened in the past. And that's precisely the opportunity that the single source of truth that FlightAware is able to deliver on a global basis brings to the aviation industry. So we take the single source of truth and we drop it into all of the products that we have available at FlightAware, whether they be web and mobile, our reports and analytics, and our APIs. And we're going to talk about that here in just a little bit. So we've been telling this story about flights for over 17 years on a global basis. And what starts to emerge is a tremendous data set that we want to talk more about on how we're opening up access to this data set. This data set contains over 700 million stories of flights, flight data objects within our database. We're adding 142,000 flights to this database every single day. And it's yielding a data set that's over 5 petabytes in size, which is 5 million gigabytes. So it's a tremendous amount of data. And so that gives FlightAware the ability to offer a data set to the aviation industry that in reality kind of becomes a time machine. So what we're talking about is the aviation industry can have access to real-time data. What is happening with my aircraft right now? It can look into the future through those FlightAware Foresight predictive capabilities that we talked about just a moment ago. And now we're democratizing access to the historical capabilities of this tremendous data set. And so that's the value proposition that puts FlightAware at the center of the aviation industry. So if you're an OEM and you're interested in understanding how your fleet has been utilized over a certain time period, this data set is going to be incredibly interesting to you. If you're interested in analyzing your competitors' fleets and seeing how those aircraft are going to be utilized, this is also an interesting opportunity. If you're a dispatcher and you want to understand exactly where my aircraft is right now, this present viewing capability of the FlightAware data is going to be tremendously helpful. Maybe you're an FBO and you just want to know when to dispatch the person in the fuel truck in order to meet the aircraft as it pulls onto your FBO ramp. The FlightAware Foresight predictive capabilities are going to be very, very interesting. So what we want to talk about more today with Tammy is access to the historical set of FlightAware's data through one of our APIs called Aero API. Tammy?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Matt. As Matt mentioned, I am the product owner of the data integration products here at FlightAware. And my primary goal is to get this aviation intelligence into the hands of virtually every organization out there that can find benefit in having accurate, actionable flight data. So we've always been really keenly focused on getting real-time access to flights into the hands of organizations across the globe. And we've been doing that through our Aero API product. We actually have thousands of customers that are tapping into the power of FlightAware's data and accessing that through Aero API. They're building software solutions to meet their needs, their customers' needs, and they're doing all that and relying on the power of FlightAware's data. Now, the other thing we're doing at the same time is we've been collecting and saving flight data for decades, for 17 years, actually. And our founding fathers were passionate about data and they were curious about the future. And while they didn't entirely know what they were going to do with that data, the one thing they knew for sure is that we could continue to learn from the past as we progress into the future. And with that said, we saved everything. We have 713 million flight objects stacked away in a data repository. We were saving data way before it was cool to save data. Was way before there were data warehouses, data lakes, and any of the tools to monitor and manage and access that data. We've stacked it away and it is sitting there available for our use today. They believed we could continue to learn, as I say, from the past. So we have two things. We have Aero API, and our customers are using that today to gain access to real-time flight tracking and flight status information, and they're using it to solve business problems all across the globe. And we have the single largest, most comprehensive data repository of flight tracking data in the world. And we have both of those things underneath one roof. So that presents to us a very unique opportunity. We are thrilled to announce today that we are going to be opening up access to that vast trove of historical data history that we have. And we're going to be making it available to our customers in our Aero API product. That is going to enable you to leverage not only the historical data, as well as the real-time and the predictive data that Matt talked about, all from a single source here at FlightAware. Now, I've mentioned the word API a couple of times. I just want to take a really fast minute to explain what exactly is an API. API stands for Application Programming Interface. For software developers, it is the means and mechanism really that they use to gain access, easy access to third-party data and functionality. Here at FlightAware, we have Aero API, and that is the pipeline that connects software developers back to FlightAware's rich data repository. It's going to do a couple of things to you for you. There are thousands of APIs out there. It's going to provide on-demand access to information, queryable, where you'll be able to further refine and filter the data you're requesting, return it immediately back to you so you can integrate that directly into your application. We have built Arrow API from the ground up, using the latest standards and methodologies, delivering to you a RESTful interface, returning JSON flight objects. And that means for software developers, it's going to be compatible with nearly every modern programming language out there. They are familiar with this. It's going to resonate with them. The other thing that we know that is really, really important to software developers building applications to meet their business needs and their customers' business needs is reliability and resiliency. We've covered that as well. And we have included that in our high-level service level agreements, where we are approaching nearly 100% proven uptime. So let's go back to what exactly does it mean when we say we're unlocking access to our historical data. You are going to be able to reach back and obtain flight data in the entire flight history for flights all the way back to January 1st, 2011. You're going to be able to request that data in a number of different ways. You'll be able to request it by flight ident, whether it be the ICAO or the IATA flight ident, or by registration number, whichever meets your needs the best. You'll be able to specify a date or a range of dates, and we'll immediately return back to you those flight objects as a JSON flight object. It's going to include the complete summary for that flight. And so in addition to the origin and destination, you're going to have access to the scheduled, estimated, actual, out, off, on, and in times. The flight status, did it fly? Was it canceled? Did it divert? You're given access to things like the aircraft registration number, the aircraft type, and we'll include everything that we have and we know about that flight, including things like gate and terminal information when it's available. Now, the second thing we're going to be able to do and unlock for you is the complete flight track. And what that means is we'll be able to return to you all the positions that were reported for that flight from origin to destination. It's going to be an array of positions, which of course is going to include the lat long, but as well the timestamp of that lat long, that position that was reported, and the speed and altitude. And the last thing that we're going to open up access to you is the availability of static map images. The static map images will reflect the track that flight flown on a map, and you'll be able to specify additional layers that you would like to obtain along with that. Things like geographic boundaries, airports, including even the weather radar overlaid on that. By returning to you a static image as a base 64 encoded image, you're going to be able to easily integrate that image directly into your application, where you'll be able to visualize what that track looks like. So we talked a lot about all the ways and things that we're going to be exposing this historical data to you. You might be wondering, what exactly can I do with all this historical data? We have use cases from dozens of customers in different ways that they've wanted to be using this data, and we've listened to them over the years. I've listed here just a handful of the different types of things that you can do with this historical data. I think probably the most obvious thing that is now readily available that you'll be able to do is facilitate all your post-operational analysis. Perhaps you're looking to do some post-ops analysis on a particular event. It could be a weather event or an event held in Orlando every other year. It could be a problematic flight or a problematic aircraft. Maybe you're looking into a flight incident, and that flight incident was last week or last month or last year or even several years back. So the circumstances surrounding that flight are a little bit fuzzy. You will be able to get flight information about that flight, including the complete track and all the positions reported. You might have a repository of historical data that you're using today, and you're using it for various things. But from time to time, you know that there's gaps in your data. You're missing things. You had some lost data and outage, maybe some missing link. You'll be able to tap into our data repository directly and fill in all the data gaps that you might have. Another thing that is very useful is getting complete aircraft history. Perhaps you own an aircraft or a fleet of aircraft, or you have a flight school, you'll be able to see aircraft usage, utilization levels. Where did that aircraft fly? What are the regions of the world that it was going to? Maybe you're studying some, looking up at some mechanical failures, and you want to see what that aircraft has been doing in the past week or the past month that led up to that mechanical failure. You could be, like I said, an aircraft owner, or you could be a leaser, or you could be providing insurance for aircraft. All of these sorts of things are reasons that you might want to have complete history on when an aircraft is done. You can be using it to analyze the decisions you made last week, last month, after the fact, or you can be using some of this data to make better decisions today. I need to make a decision today, but if only I knew a little bit more about what happened last week, you would be able to make a better decision. Doing things like comparing plan to actual are a no-brainer here. You'll be able to compare flight times, the track flown to what you intended to do and what actually occurred. Looking at that data, you're going to be able to identify trends, how that aircraft performed, how that flight performed over time. You'll be able to do that based upon an airport or various other filters. I used our very own flight history when I booked my flight to come here. I was planning on coming in late last night, arriving just shortly before midnight. By taking a quick look at the flight history for the flight that I was intending on taking, I could see that over the past 2 weeks, 20% of the time, it was at least an hour late, putting me in well after midnight, and it was canceled or diverted 3 times. With that information readily available, I was able to make a much better decision real time. So we talked about unleashing and gaining access to this historical information and using that to understand and solve our business problems. Now, before I pass it back to Matt, I just want to cover one more thing. This all sounds great. Maybe it sounds a little bit complicated. I just want to assure you, we have been investing heavily in the last year to make Aero API easy to use across the board. We have extremely comprehensive online documentation for software developers. We are using the latest standards, things that the software developers are very familiar with. We also have an online developer portal, and that's going to allow you to explore our endpoints on demand online. You'll be able to make a request and immediately see that data returned back to you. So you can start to imagine and envision how you can incorporate that data into your own applications. The second thing we've done is we introduced something we call Aero Apps last year. Aero Apps is just simply a collection of applications and services that leverage the power of Aero API. It uses Aero API and makes calls underneath the covers. You'll be able to go in there and take a look how we implemented those calls in our source code. You'll have complete access to the source code that you can use as your jumping off point to start your own development efforts. Now, if you like to use some third-party tools like Postman, you can easily download the Open API specification file, import that right into tools like Postman. And again, you'll be able to really easily be able to explore our API, understand the data that we have available and all the different means and mechanisms that you can access that data. And the last thing we've done is we've provided an API usage summary. Online, you can see how you're using our API, your usage trends, and that's going to help you when you're trying to do planning for what your application solution looks like. So with that, I'd like to pass it back to Matt.
All right, thanks, Tammy. So we make it easier than ever to access this historical data. We have 3 tiers of access to Aero API. 2 of them have the historical data access capabilities. You don't actually even need to speak with anyone at FlightAware in order to gain access to this. You can just go to the FlightAware website, look for Aero API, enter in the pertinent information, and you'll have instant access to this tremendous historical data set, as well as live flight tracking capabilities and predictive capabilities. The other thing that we would like to iterate is that FlightAware is very, very committed to the continual development of this API, especially along historical access lines. So right now you're able to make queries on a flight by flight basis. We're soon to expand that to being able to make queries based on airport, operating carrier, summarization stats based on commercial aviation and general aviation, as well as other very interesting endpoints. So we've told you a little bit about how FlightAware is the very best at creating those flight data objects. We walked you through quickly the 4 fundamental value propositions of FlightAware that make us the very best at telling those stories of flights. And we walked you through how we're opening up the historical access to this tremendous data set that FlightAware has of over 713 million flights that's growing on a daily basis. So we will open it up for questions at this time. Any questions? Yes, sir.
What if there was Mark Phelps, but the privacy issue seems to be the elephant in the room here.
Sure.
And what protections are there for someone who might not want one of your customers to know all of this information?
Yeah, so the question relates to privacy and opening up information that aircraft operators may want to have protected. So at a very high level, FlightAware is very supportive of privacy and privacy initiatives. So we support that in 2 big fronts right now. First is through the FAA LAD program. That's their aircraft flight tracking blocking initiative. So if an aircraft operator is interested in blocking their flight tracking information, they can submit an application through the FAA. We actually facilitate that process at FlightAware so that their aircraft will then be blocked from tracking by the general public. We then continue to serve that customer by offering them a product that allows them to have their own discrete flight tracking experience that's open only to them and other stakeholders that they might elect to have participate in having access to that flight tracking data. So that's the first way that we're supporting privacy. The second way that we're supporting privacy is through the FAA's PIA program, the Private ICAO Address Initiative. So as you all may be aware, transponders on aircraft, not only are they broadcasting the tail number or the registration of the aircraft, but there's also a hexadecimal ID that's broadcast with that. And there's a data set that is correlating those hex IDs to the tail numbers. The FAA is handling that correlation, but they've allowed aircraft operators now to go and change the hex ID in their transponders so that it matches to a different unused tail number that is not actually the tail number of the aircraft itself. So aircraft operators are actually able to change the tail number of their airplanes to further protect their privacy. And this is another place that FlightAware is very supportive. We're working with the industry to push this program. And we support operators today by helping them with that application process in order to have access to that program. So talking about the access to this historical data, that data is not entering into Aero API unless you're actually the aircraft operator of the blocked aircraft yourself. So if you have a blocked aircraft, we can give you access to your blocked aircraft information within the FlightAware ecosystem, but no one else is going to have access to that unless you elect to have other people, other interesting stakeholders to have access to that information. One quick example of that. So imagine you're a private aircraft operator, you're on the blocked aircraft list, and you go into FBOs and they never know you're coming because they can't see you. Your aircraft tracking information is blocked. You can actually elect to have your flight tracking information discreetly shown to the FBOs that will be providing service to you for that particular flight or series of flights. So you can say, all right, at my home base FBO, I always want them to be able to see flights to my home airport, so that way the line service technicians will always be ready for the arrival of that aircraft, but no one else is going to be able to see that private flight tracking information.
To follow up on that, and
Sure.
Now, in terms of the value of the data for software developers and the other of your customers who would find this to be valuable, can you give me a sense of what percentage of the private aviation fleet is being blocked, and does that compromise their capacity for predictive and useful information
Sure.
based on that?
So I don't actually know the statistics of how many aircraft are actually blocked. I'd say it's not an insignificant amount. It's probably less than 50%, but higher than 20%. We can get you more statistics on that if you are interested. We are still able to create that predictive information on behalf of those blocked aircraft and deliver that information to them on their behalf and also to their stakeholders. So FlightAware is still able to generate value for those aircraft that are operating under blocked call signs.
Hello, Ben Sampson from Business Airport Magazine. You mentioned lots of different potential users. I was just wondering if you could give me an indication of the cost. I mean, obviously it must be scalable, but affordable, say FBO or.
Sure. Yeah, so for our FBO customers, we actually have a web and mobile based product that starts at about $100 per month. Being able to access the data through the API, like we said before, we have a handful of licenses. For the standard tier, I believe the monthly spend starts at.
Yeah, it's how you use the data. It's entirely usage based, your overall cost. So the more calls that you make to request data, the more it's going to cost you. With that said, you're paying for exactly and only the data that you need, and because it's completely usage based fees. Our standard and premium tiers, which are going to give you higher levels of and add on some of our premium data products and increase things like the SLA and the support available and so on and so forth, come in at a minimum monthly spend of $100 or $1,000. But again, how you use the data, it's completely usage based. So you're paying for exactly what you use.
So it's like, it's $100 flat rate.
It's $100 minimum rate to obtain that standard tier and $1,000 minimum to gain access to the premium tier, which has some of our premium data layers, our increased SLAs and things of that nature.
And the per query charges are pennies per query. They're very, very affordable. We publish all those prices on the FlightAware website. Any other questions? Thank you so much. Please drop by booth 3631 for a live demo of Aero API if you're interested. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.